polar vortex requires wine. A lot of wine. Hello, my dear, sweet, beautiful fellow plant people. Welcome back if you are returning to my channel. If you are new, my name is Jen. I go by The Leafy Geek here, also on Instagram. And we're in a polar vortex right now. There's nothing to do except sit inside and dream of warmer days. So I asked for feedback on my Instagram to see if people would be interested in me filming a video and talking a little bit about my second chance plants. So those are the plants that I kind of fell out of love with. The plants that I have and I've cared for and I've tried to maintain, but for one reason or another, they and I just kind of mutually didn't appreciate each other for a while, and I wasn't really sure if I was going to want to hang on to them, but have in the days, weeks, or months, probably months, since kind of realizing that I wasn't a super big fan of them anymore, they've kind of found ways back into my heart. And there are quite a few on this list, actually. Oh man. Kind of highlight some plants that are, you know, they're in my collection, they've been hanging out, they've been surviving the winter, but they're plants that for a while I just, for one reason or another, if it was upkeep, if it was care, if they weren't just doing particularly well for me, if they were just the type of plant that I wasn't really wanting to devote a lot of attention to and was potentially trying to rehome a little bit, you know, having that kind of conversation with myself, like, do I want to give this plant to a friend? That was something that I was looking into for quite a few of these. For one reason or another, they are going to be staying in my collection, and I thought I would give you a little sneak peek as to what they are and why they're staying. So the first plant on this list I've had for kind of a long time. This plant, I can't really recall when or where I got it, but it's had a couple of incarnations throughout its life with me. The most recent being this one. So this is my Skindapsis pictus exotica, and this plant has never done very well for me. It's been one of those plants that's just kind of been there, and it's been kind of scrawny, not the best grower, pretty slow, and I've had it in a couple of different, you know, environments in my home, a little bit higher light. I had it outside this past summer, and that's where I really noticed that the decline happened. It just did not do well outside in my fairly shaded patio, which is bright indirect light all summer long. It just didn't like it. It didn't like it out there. It constantly yellowed. I kept up on the watering with it, which I don't know. The reason that this plant failed for me for so long is a bit of a mystery to me. But since I've had it in one place, in a north-facing window, in my home, and I gave it a trellis, it seems to be a lot happier. This new growth, you see this leaf here, I believe this one is a new leaf as well, and then of course this one. These three new growth points emerged this winter. It's a mystery. I don't know. I don't know why this plant is suddenly decided to live, but it's doing quite well. Some of these bigger leaves, these are kind of the originals. What happened was, when I brought this back inside from the summer, it was deteriorated to a point where I just had to take cuttings from it. And the roots looked fairly intact. I don't really know what was wrong, but it wasn't producing new growth, and the leaves along the bottom were yellowing. So gave it the chop, rooted 3 cuttings, and they're all in the same pot here. So this is just it's a chunky kind of barky mix I use for most of my plants. It's just, equal parts perlite, potting soil, and orchid bark. And I'm maintaining the watering with it. I just water it when the top, like, half inch of soil feels dry. Stick my finger in there, and it's just doing so well now. And I say that with a bit of caution. A little bit superstitious about this plant. I would really like to see it just trellis the heck out of this thing. It's still a mystery to me. I don't know what I did, if I did anything, to let this guy find its groove and just start growing. But it is. Not going to complain. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I'm going to leave it where it is. That's the plan for my Skindapsis pictus exotica. Next up is this little guy. This is my Peperomia velutina. This is the bicolor variety, which means that the leaves aren't a full solid green. They have stripes of silver, and the back sides of the leaves turn this really pretty kind of maroon color. So Peperomia and I have struggled this winter. And I'm kind of, my Peperomia collection has shrunk quite a bit, and it's not necessarily a good thing. They're dying, essentially. I'm killing them all, and I don't know why. But for that purpose, I just kind of fell out of love with this plant. It wasn't doing the greatest. It wasn't like straight up kicking the bucket like some of my Peperomias did, but it just was kind of dramatic and not, just not loving its life, getting very wilty very fast, losing its succulency. I found that I was having to water it really frequently. Really, what I have this plant in, it's just a little 4-inch terracotta pot, and I have it in this cashpo, this cover pot here. And I had it in a north-facing window that's supplemented with an aspect grow light. And I kind of feel like that was the problem. This plant was, I think, getting too much light. Even in that situation, it was too much for it, and it was drying out too quickly. So I have since kind of moved it away from the light source. I've moved it away from the window, actually. I have this, it receives ambient light, so it's still getting some light through the window, but it's definitely away from any artificial light source. And I'm trying to maintain watering with this one a little bit more frequently. I'm not as lax with my watering schedule as I am with some of my other plants. And it seems to be responding to that. So for this one, I tend to try and keep the soil fairly damp. If the surface has dried out, that's when I tend to water, and I soak it through. So with that, I can say that there's quite a bit of growth on it. As you can see, it did lose a lot of the lower leaves on these stems. That was kind of a casualty of figuring out the lighting situation for it. But it seems to be rebounding. There's a lot of new little growthlets popping up in the center here. And the leaves have regained a lot of their succulency. It's a little bit thinner leaf variety of Peperomia than some of the others that I've had in my collection, but you can tell when it is well watered and it's received enough water. So this plant, honestly, I think is a pretty good contender for my BioOrb, which I have yet to plant. I still have not planted that thing. So I'm thinking about that, getting this into a more controlled environment. I feel like this Peperomia would be one that would respond really well to that. But I think for now, I'm going to leave it where it is, just on an end table over here, receiving some pretty consistent indirect ambient light. And I do really appreciate it. I really appreciate the growth structure on it, actually. Compared to some of my other Peperomias, which are a little bit more compact, I do like how this one kind of branches out And I really do love the leaf kind of composition and texture. It's just a really pretty, I don't know if you can even see that, just really pretty variety of peperomia. So again, with most of my peperomia, I've been struggling this winter, but this one, as it does better for me, I think it's restoring some hope on my end of things. Just in that whenever you can make a plant do fairly well, for the current situation, like Minnesota winter, Minnesota February suck. I'm just going to say it. Whenever you can get to a place with a plant that hasn't been doing well and suddenly is doing better, it does a lot for your self-esteem as a houseplant enthusiast. So this is Peperomia velutina, and I'm hanging on to this one. Cheers. Let's look at a philodendron. I said that weird. Philodendron. This guy, everybody's favorite, the overrated Philodendron Brantianum. So mine hasn't grown a damn inch. I ended up having to cut this stem because it was trying to grow, and for whatever reason, which I have not yet been able to figure out why I was having so much trouble with this thing, it would throw off these little leaves that would end up shriveling up and basically rotting in their little, what do you call this thing? Where the leaves emerge from the philodendrons, it would just rot and just dry up and shrivel away and melt away. So I got sick of that and cut it off because I decided if I'm going to keep the plant, I'm going to keep the existing growth that I have. I'm going to try and maintain it, and I'm not going to worry so much about the upward and outward growth on this thing. Because I really do enjoy the leaves. I enjoy the structure of it. As you can see, a lot of mine, the leaf tips are fairly crunchy and dried out. So that's telling me that it's not receiving probably the humidity that it wants. But I had it right next to a humidifier for a long time, and it kept on giving me that crappy growth that just didn't go anywhere. So now I just have it sitting back on the shelf next to my other philodendron, my heartleaf, my green heartleaf right there. And it hasn't done a whole lot for a very long time. It's just kind of been sitting here neutral. But I think that it is trying to do something again. It's got this little growth point happening, and this one is kind of reactivating here. So we'll see. This one is still kind of, like, the jury's still out for me on this one. I did not pay a ton of money for this. I can't remember what I did end up paying for it, but I think I got this one from Steve's Leaves, and it was probably, I can't remember. I hazard a guess. I'd say probably around 40 or 50 bucks for it, but I cannot remember. So it wasn't a ton of money, but it was kind of enough money for me to kind of be disappointed with it when I got into my home and tried to kind of, foster growth with it. It just wasn't going anywhere. So I was thinking about trying to rehome this one to someone who was maybe more of a philodendron expert and might be able to coax some more growth out of it. But I'm seeing some life, some activity on it, and I really do love the leaves. I love the patterning and the coloration on the leaves, and I would really, really love for this thing to do something. So that's what I'm holding on to hope with this brandy, and hopefully it will kind of pick up again this summer, and we'll see what it does. But this, again, Philodendron Brantianum is one that I'm going to be holding on to for a little while yet. So the next plant on my list, my second chance plants list, is this beauty. As you can probably tell if you've seen some of my other houseplant tour videos, she's a lot sparser, a lot smaller than she used to be, and there's a reason for that. So this is my Marble Queen Pothos, and this gal struggled after coming indoors for the winter. She, unlike my Skindapsis pictus exotica, this gal loved the outdoors. Absolutely loved it out there. Thrived, bushed out, trailed down, was this gorgeous, lovely, huge plant. And I brought her inside because temps started to dip, as they do here, polar vortex. So it got cold, and all my houseplants needed to come in. This one was no exception. This is one that I wanted to save, so I did some kind of precautionary treatments on it, you know, to kind of see if I could nip some potential pest pressures in the bud, you know, bringing plants indoors. You kind of expect that there will be pests attached to them if they've been hanging out on your patio all summer. But this one didn't notice anything out of the ordinary with it. You know, did my precautionary, you know, pest treatment on it, and stuck it in probably the brightest room in my house to just try and, you know, kind of, all my plants that I had outdoors, I did acclimate. I, you know, would bring them in for short periods of time and kind of try and get them readjusted to indoor life. This one was no exception. Hated it. Absolutely hated it. Leaves just kept yellowing all the way up and down the vines. Just went yellow, dropped off, went yellow, dropped off, just all the way along the vines. So I was then looking, you might be able to see that there are some bare vines just kind of hanging out here. Those are the remnants. Those are the casualties. This plant just started dropping leaves like crazy. And finally I got it stabilized to a point. I took a bunch of cuttings. Ooh, let me show you these. Which are very well rooted now. Honestly, I will call this a success story, which is part of the reason why this thing is on this list. But took some cuttings to kind of see if I could salvage some of it, because I didn't know if this plant was going to make it. Honestly, I really didn't have a clue because it kept yellowing. It has stabilized finally. It took a few months for it to just kind of stop the discoloration, and has since put out some new growth. You can see these little leaves, and they all are they're maintaining decent amounts of that variegation that you see on Marble Queens. So that I'm happy about. So this plant is doing quite well. I think it is due potentially for a repotting in the spring, which would be great because then I could put these all back together and would still have a pretty decent sized plant. I mean, this isn't bad. This size of a plant is not bad, but I kind of want to just bring them all back together. And the whole little Marble Queen Pothos fam. So that's the plan. These rooted up really nicely. These stabilized. I think we're okay now. So I still do have a Marble Queen Pothos. I was really, really sad about this thing and its decline. It was never really on the list of plants to kind of get rid of or rehome. I was just kind of heartbroken about it. I was losing it and I didn't want to. And I, you know, was doing whatever I could, but it was so hard to kind of figure out what was going on with it. But it seems like things are okay now. So, Marble Queen Pothos, staying with me. So the last plant I would like to share with you tonight that is back in my good graces after taking some time off that list is another queen. This is my Crimson Queen Hoya. This is going to be kind of an interesting little scenario here because I have a couple of things going on with this Hoya, or this variety I should say. So this was the first Crimson Queen, or what's left of it, that I had ever had in my possession. So found this at a local nursery, had it potted up for a long time. It was one of the first Hoya I think I ever had, honestly, that I'd ever purchased. As you can see, there's kind of a new little growth happening there, but as you can also see, these are in water. They are rerooting. So that plant that I had potted up for a very long time started to suddenly decline. All of the vines in it did. And I will attribute that to probably neglect. That is my bad. And it's something that happened probably because I was getting into Hoya at the time, and some of those more exciting, exotic, different, harder to find varieties of Hoya, those were taking up my attention. And this poor gal was just kind of stuck, did fine for a very long time, just held the fort down of those, traditional Hoya. Nothing super exciting about it, though, in my mind. Now, I will say, I have gained a new appreciation for this Hoya, because I don't know how you couldn't. This Hoya is just an amazing grower, and it has these beautiful leaves with this beautiful, variegation pattern on it, where the leaves come in virtually white, a lot of them do. This one has a better example of that. You can see this is a newer leaf, and it's come in quite white and is kind of developing that green chlorophyll loving, coloration on it. So this is kind of a new growth point on this particular cutting, which kind of goes to show you I should probably pot these back up. I think they're ready. But, so I had this Crimson Queen for a long time. This one is really cool too because it has a lot of half moons on it. That's something I noticed. That was really neat about this one. I think there's a half moon there. There's just, there's a lot of cool things going on with this particular plant. It's kind of dusty though. Oh, gotta get better about that. But it's got some really nice coloration on it. We'll get this potted back up. But while I had this one, I ended up picking up another Crimson Queen, and that's this one. And I love this plant. I absolutely love this particular Crimson Queen. Is maybe one of my favorite Hoyas at this point because it is beautiful. It's got so much variety on it. These are newer growth points. You can see there's leaves coming in there. Every single leaf has character and different coloration on it, different variegation. It's just, can I pick a favorite? I don't know if I can pick a favorite leaf on this thing. There's so many beautiful leaves on it, and it's grown so well for me. This plant is just beautiful. I really can't say anything bad about this plant. And if there's anything that, being a collector teaches you about certain, if you're collecting a certain type of plant that you love, you learn really to fall back and appreciate or reappreciate some of the classics that you have in your collection. And that's what I've done with this one. This particular Hoya, the Crimson Queen, I am just blown away, like newly blown away by. It's so pretty, and it provides such a cool contrasting like texture and color and variety on a shelf with other Hoyas. So I am absolutely thrilled that I still have this, and I'm absolutely thrilled that I have my original, because this is pretty sentimental to me now. This plant was one of the Hoya that really made me understand that this was a type of plant that I was interested in learning more about and collecting more of and growing. And now I have almost 100, or right around 100 species of Hoya in my collection. And I owe that to this plant. I really, truly believe that. So Hoya Crimson Queen has definitely made that list of second chance plants for me. I love this plant. And I highly, highly recommend all of you who are Hoya lovers, seasoned veteran collectors, or just new to Hoya, find one of these. They're really quite easy to find. Get one in your collection. You won't regret it. That's it for me, you guys. Until next time, I hope you all are doing well. And I'm gonna bring out some more plant content. I think my channel tends to err, especially, getting into spring and summer. I err on the garden side of things, but I do have some more ideas for some houseplant content that I would like to share with you. So I hope you'll stick around for both. And until next time, please enjoy your plants.